If the words history and book trigger bad memories of papers, projects, and pop quizzes, stick with me because my next guest's anthology of 60s, 70s, and 80s consumer culture in Boston is not that kind of history book. In By Me Boston, local author Brian Coleman takes us back in time with nearly 400 posters, ads, and flyers from the era of Jimi Hendrix and Tina Turner, concerts at the Rathskeller, and haircuts like these, all direct from the source. Ads in the Bay State Banner, Boston After Dark, Boston Rock, and my former employer, the Boston Phoenix. This week, he's taking the spirit of the book to the big screen at the Braude Theater with rare archival video of everything from music to TV and beyond. Brian Coleman is also the founder of the Good Road Media Company and the author of the Hip Hop Histories Rakim Told Me and Check the Technique 1 and 2. He joins me now. Brian, thanks for being here.
Hey, it's great to be here.
What was the inspiration for this book? Why did you put it together?
The inspiration, I mean, it's kind of funny the way it started. It started as, let me do a fanzine. I'm a big fanzine guy. I love the DIY aspect of it. And so it kind of started that way of, let me just put some random funny stuff together. And then as I started gathering, it started snowballing. And I said, because I've done books before, I've self-published my own books in the past. And I said, I think this could be a book. You know, I think this could work. And then I started expanding it. There are two main sources for the book, and I did kind of grab from all over the place, but David Bieber and the David Bieber archives were first and foremost. David's an amazing guy, and he gave me really amazing access to his...
How would you describe him? I actually worked at the Phoenix at the same time he was there, and I remember him as this sort of eccentric-looking old guy who walked around in his socks and had a Braille Playboy at his cube. But for people who don't know David Bieber, how would you describe him?
David is an archivist and collector par excellence. A lot of people collect and amass, and you could say hoard things, but David always did it with a more artful eye. And so it's pop culture, what he collects. So it's movie posters, T-shirts, photos, like he was
a lot of rock stuff, right?
Yes, definitely, because he was affiliated with WBCN. He worked at WBCN, the Phoenix, FNX. So
you got stuff from David Bieber.
Yes.
What was the other?
And Kay Bourne, who was with the Bay State Banner for decades and decades. And so her archive is absolutely amazing as well. And it's actually at Emerson now, but at the time, it hadn't gone to Emerson yet. So I had really amazing access to that.
I was initially skeptical when a review copy showed up on my desk. I thought, who would want to read a book of ads and flyers? Yeah. And as soon as you open it, if you're not rushing, if you sort of let yourself go, I found it completely riveting. I actually just had a colleague stop by my desk and get stuck there for about 30 minutes today. I want to talk through what seemed to me to be some of the big categories. And you don't break them down by category. It's kind of pastiche. But there are a few things that I think looking through this book does. The first, and tell me if I'm wrong here, the first is it's a chronicle of all the famous people, musicians in particular, artists, who have come through this area at some point in time. And I think we have some images attached to this concept that I'm talking about. Hopefully we do. Yeah, there we go. There's a poster from a Bob Marley, Patti LaBelle
concert. Which just had its 40th anniversary just like a couple weeks ago.
So, and we mentioned, you know, Tina Turner earlier, Jimi Hendrix. There's a ton of stuff like that. Then there are the iconic places that were... or I shouldn't just say places, iconic local institutions that were here in Gun. WILD.
Hugely
for people who, can you explain a little bit about WILD for people who don't know it?
WILD was a daytime or AM station, but was a massively important station for the African American community, especially in Boston, in the 60s through the 2000s.
And we saw right after that a poster from The Rat. I was not here in time for The Rat. A lot of our viewers will know it, but what was The Rat?
The Rat, a.k.a. the Rathskeller, which I just walked by yesterday, is now the Hotel Commonwealth. There's me. That's in front of the old sign. Well, actually, a replica of the sign. It was basically the CBGBs of Boston. It was where the punk musicians and punk kids congregated and really started the transition. Really what CBGBs and the Rat was about was this transition from playing covers to being like, you know, we might not know how to play, but we can make our own music. And it kind of sprung from there in Kenmore Square. All
right, my favorites, and I want to move quickly here because I want to at least nod at all this stuff. A lot of the ads that you highlight show how radically different the aesthetic sensibility was. in the decades that you're talking about. And this is not a news flash, but let's take a look at some of the images here. Okay, yeah, we had, here's the Flaming Star, Maurice Star. I can't even remember what that's an ad
Prince
for.
Charles Alexander, my good friend.
Who was Prince Charles Alexander?
An incredible jazz and R&B musician who's now a professor at Berklee College of Music.
Really?
Yes. And he's around all the time, and I see him often, and he's an amazing guy.
And the opening shot, it went really quickly. The white guys with the funny bowl cuts. Do you remember who they are off the top of your head?
Oh, that was so there was
Jerry
this one,
Valley.
Jerry
Valley.
And he's he was known at the time. There's this one publication I love called Nightlife and Nighttime that kind of focused more on, in New York you would call it bridge and tunnel, like the kind of the outer suburbs, lounges and hotels and things like that. And that was a good example of that.
All right. There is an ad for Suffolk Downs in here, which I want to pull up because a colleague of mine said basically this ad is saying, do you like to get high? Come to Suffolk Downs. The verbiage is basically, do you like big horses? Do you like little horses? Do you like brown horses or maybe red horses? Come to Suffolk Downs and you'll find a horse that you like. A totally different way of at least advertising than we're used to today, and maybe suggestive of a countercultural lifestyle.
Well, a lot of Boston After Dark back in the day, the Real Paper, the early Cambridge Phoenix, Boston Phoenix, the ads were, sometimes you had to really decipher them. You had to kind of sit with them. And they would kind of unveil themselves to you if you looked at them, almost like, look at the pointillist picture and it'll come.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's another thing that struck me looking at this stuff, is how much more comfortable we were decades ago at dealing with a large amount of text, or a large amount of text and graphic complexity. We didn't just expect it to click instantaneously.
Well, I think really what it boils down to, looking back, and this is too early for me in the early 70s, but back then you would sit down with the paper and you would read it for an hour, and maybe you would light up a joint and sit down and read Boston After Dark. But it was an experience. It wasn't just transactional, bam, 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 what's the news, what's the news? You were
a holistic experience,
or this ad is really interesting. Let me spend some time with that, which you rarely do these days.
I want to ask you about one more flyer, and this is an ad, I guess, for Mitch T-shirts, which I think who was Mitch?
Mitch was the very famous bouncer at the Rat. Very well known for anyone who went there. Always dressed in a suit, and a very nice guy, unless you were doing something that you weren't supposed to be doing. And not.
He always wore a suit like that?
Pretty much.
I never would have guessed that was a bouncer. He looks like an academic or something. Although he looks like kind of a tough guy.
He was actually a musician too.
All right, we are running out of time, but tell me about the event that you're going to be doing at the Coolidge.
So I've had book events that are kind of slideshows and panel talks, and then recently I've started with something I call the Buy Me Boston Video Loft.
I think we can actually, as you talk, we can look at a little bit of this video.
Okay.
So the Buy Me Boston Video Loft, which is different, it's video images as opposed to stills.
Yes, and it's basically kind of bringing it to life in a different way, bringing the book and that era to life in a different way.
There's a little bit from Say Brother, the WGBH TV show that preceded Basic Black.
That's the Johnson Crew.
What was the Johnson Crew?
The Johnson Crew were a local R&B, electro, kind of early rap group from Roxbury.
I've let time get away from me because there's too much great stuff I want to talk about. Give me the specifics about this.
Okay, so the Video Loft is kind of the video version of the book. It's at the Brattle this Thursday, the 22nd, at 7:30, one showing only. I'll be doing these ongoing, and people can get more information, at my website, buymeboston.com.
And can they go to the Coolidge website too? Get some information.
The Brattle would have.
Brattle, I apologize.
Okay. Yeah, they would have that, and so it's generally around.
And finally, Volume 2 going to be coming out?
I could do volumes 2 through 4 next week, but yes, it will. It's forthcoming.
Excellent. Brian Coleman, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
The book, again, is Buy Me Boston. You can watch the Video Loft this Thursday at 7:30, as Brian said, at the Brattle Theater.